welcome to the M Word CIC. I'm absolutely thrilled to have Steve back in with me. Today's a very special session because we met literally by reading his original article around his experience for himself and his daughter, who was really struggling at school. Now, obviously, I don't know the histories and all the ins and outs of it, so I'm going to keep my mouth very quiet and shut so that Steve can take over and really tell us the experiences for himself as a head teacher, and then himself as an experience with his parenting in and around his daughter who started to deteriorate with her mental health.
I guess the first signs were fairly early on in September. My daughter would mention having a headache,
Right.
and it wasn't completely new to us, so we weren't overly concerned because in year six, she'd sometimes had headaches occasionally,
Right.
and we felt she was perhaps becoming prone to migraines, which are in our family, and we'd seen a doctor at some point, and we were just kind of monitoring. But between September and October, though, that first half term at secondary school, the headaches went from being occasional to weekly, and then by October half term, so just in a matter of 7 or 8 weeks, they were maybe twice weekly.
Right.
We'd ask her how she was the rest of the time. She'd be a bit quiet, say, "Okay, school's okay." Didn't really want to talk about it, but lots of children don't.
Yes.
Then we noticed we always eat together, family meal at tea time. We noticed she started to not, she would play with her food rather than eat it. She would maybe eat a little bit, but then say she had tummy ache.
Yeah.
And these were the little clues that
Little clues already becoming quite
start,
established.
yeah, starting to build up. And we wouldn't make a big deal of it at the table. We didn't
No.
want to add any pressure, but we were kind of just monitoring. And then one of the things which I think we didn't quite realize the significance of this, after 2 or 3 weeks, the friendship with a girl who she was going to school with, that kind of fell apart a bit, and she wasn't happy. We didn't really ever get to the bottom of why, but she just didn't want to go to school with this girl. She wanted to go by herself. And then we noticed there was a kind of a bit of we used to use the word dawdling, a bit of a delay in the morning. She didn't want to leave the house, a bit slow to depart. And our house, a family of six, it's quite frenetic in the morning. Everyone's getting their coats and their shoes and their bags and all those things. But there was this kind of reticence. And then really it all built up between September and November. And by October half term, my wife and I were really getting quite worried. So the headaches by that point had become twice weekly. She wasn't eating very well. She was also complaining of tummy ache, and there was also this sadness. Her disposition was changing,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
she went from, she's always been pretty confident and fiery and funny, but there was just this sort of sadness and a lethargy. And then actually getting her to school became harder. So she didn't really want to walk. So my wife started taking her to school. And my wife would do that on her way to work. So she had the other girls with her. The plan was to drop off our oldest daughter, and then she would go on to work and take the other girls to school. During this period, I was back at headship. I just returned to headship. I worked 20 miles away. So I didn't see any of the morning stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and my wife was kind of managing that part of the day. But with every passing day, it got harder and harder to get my daughter to school.
Uh-huh.
So the sadness became bigger. It developed into tears in the morning. And it reached the point where actually physically getting her out of the car was very difficult. So sometimes staff would come and help to try and get her out of the car. She would be sobbing and dysregulated. My wife obviously would be upset because seeing our daughter upset. Her sisters would be upset in the car.
Yeah.
Then they're late for work and late for school.
Yes.
And that became a pattern. And but we heard the things, and I don't want to be, I want to be careful what I say here, but we experienced the same things that parents often experience. So my wife often felt like the school thought it was us,
Yes.
like, oh, she's just a bit immature. And occasionally later on in the process, I heard these things for myself. Oh, you'll be fine when you come in. You're fine when you're inside. We've seen you
Yes.
smiling. Or,
Yes.
I saw you the other day and you were laughing. Um, and that those things would be said to her when she was in a dysregulated state. And my wife often felt like staff just thought she was a bit of a an emotional mother, or a bit
Right.
over the top, or a bit, or that our daughter was immature.
Yes.
But by November, we were saying this isn't right. We're concerned. By that point, she was eating much less regularly. She also started the headaches, which we, had originally thought might be migraines, which are so regular and they were causing her to vomit.
Right.
And so we actually we saw a doctor off our own bat. We pushed for this. She had blood tests. We and then we self-referred to the Here for You service through Healthy Minds
Yes.
in the November. So as a family, we went from August, when it was kind of that time where school holidays, but you're looking forward to the year ahead, to early November, where we felt something was changing very rapidly. And I guess we kind of expedited this because I knew as a head teacher how long it would take if we were to get any mental health services involved. And we had
Yeah.
discussions at home saying, we've got to act now because we've maybe missed some early signs, but we're still fairly early in the process. If
Yeah.
we try and get support now, there's a hope that we can put in some support at a fairly early stage. So we did that off our own bat in the November. Of course, during this time, I'd gone back to work and I was coming home, and then I would hear about what had happened. And by November, December, my daughter was beginning to miss maybe 1 or 2 days a week of school where she just was too distressed. So we would try and get her to school, but she just couldn't.
Yeah.
And we got to Christmas, and it was a huge relief. And any parents listening who've got anxious children will know, that when you get to that holiday and you've not got to the distress of a school morning or the distress of phoning school to say we can't get them in.
Yeah.
I'm
You have
sorry,
a break.
I just need to plug my battery in 1 second.
Oh.
Apologies.
That's okay.
So we had Christmas together as a family. We had a nice Christmas time, but then, as families in this situation will also understand, then the fear starts of the new term, and you've got this kind of juxtaposition of the fact that the child's enjoying being at home and feeling safe and not feeling that pressure related to anything to do with education. But then they register at a certain point in time that school is coming
Yes.
and that the expectation's coming back. So then it's the same in an evening or in a weekend in term time, and it's the same as you get towards the end of the holiday. And the adrenaline level rises again. And
Yes.
then the anxious traits start manifesting.
Yeah.
And so the start of January was extremely difficult. Headaches, vomiting, panic attacks, um, frantically scratching her own arms, becoming hypervigilant at unexpected situations. And at this point, at this point in time, I was about to be leaving my job, and so this is another factor in our personal story.
Yeah,
We told our children over Christmas that I was finishing work, which is something to get your heads round. And and then in January we returned to school, and it was as bleak as I've ever known. Those first few weeks, my wife was doing the school run still. I was still at work, but with every passing day, it got harder
yeah,
to just get our daughter to school. And at home, we were seeing all of the traits just ramp up to
yeah,
this unbelievable place. And and then at the end of that month, I left my job. And so the plan from that point on was I would be taking responsibility for the mornings at home.
yeah,
My wife, who was frankly exhausted from 5 very difficult months,
yes,
she would focus on getting ready for work and getting the other girls ready. I would have responsibility for getting our oldest daughter ready for school and getting her to school. And that was just the most eye-opening period because that's when I saw for myself
yes,
what a morning looked like. I'd been
yeah,
told about it, um, but seeing it for myself was heartbreaking.
yeah,
And we would try and get ready for school, and this is something that a lot of people don't understand. It was never about not wanting to go to school or
yeah,
not wanting to go to that school. She never stopped wanting to be able to go to that school. It was
yeah,
always her school. But so she would maybe get her bag ready or her shoes ready or put her coat by the door. But then this wall comes down,
yeah,
and I would take a hand, we would start to walk to school, and then the closer we got, the walk would become slower, and then we would get to a certain point and she becomes like lead, and then we would get to another point and she physically could not go any further, and I would be holding her and supporting her and saying, we'll work through this. I love you. You can do this, and all those things you do as a parent. But actually seeing your child just, falling apart,
yeah,
and invariably we would get close to school or maybe make it to the school grounds. Maybe the staff would come and try and do some sort of handover. And there was a mixture, there were some really compassionate, supportive staff. Different people would take their turns and say, "Oh, come with me. I'll look after you." Or other people might seem a bit more stern. Um, but it was very eye-opening. And my
yeah,
wife had been dealing with this for 4 or 5 months, and then it was my turn. Um, I should just add, there was a crisis before Christmas on the final day of term where my daughter was so upset about school that she actually ran off.
oh, really,
And I I don't say this lightly, but I think parents listening will be able to relate to this because it was -5. It was the coldest day of winter. It was the
right,
last day of the Christmas term. I'd gone to work. It's very rural where we live. I'd had 20 miles drive through dense, icy fog. My daughter was so distressed about the idea of going to school on, even though it was the last day of term, that in her pajamas she left the house
oh, goodness,
and went down the road, and it was -5. And that's what anxiety can do to you.
yeah,
And
you
I
lose
don't,
that capacity, don't you? You have to get away from it.
yeah, and absolutely terrifying as a parent. When I got the call 20 miles away that she'd done that, we just needed her home and safe. But
Yes,
that's what anxiety can do to you.
yeah,
And that was unfathomable to me
yeah,
at that stage. That was another moment in time where we just went as parents, whoa, this is enormous, and it's
yeah,
and it's and it's a crisis, and you know we've got to deal with this the right way now.
yeah.
I'll pause there if that's okay.
No, it's been amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that because you've broken it down into such really good moments that sometimes parents are not able to articulate because, of course, there's so much emotion. And, we just assume that the child is in distress, but it's not, it's the parent in distress because they've been seeing this deterioration. Sometimes it's really rapid, like your daughter. Other times it seems, longer, but for longer, it's just as distressing because, you're firefighting, not quite getting your head around what is the problem. So that's been really, really helpful. Thank you so much for breaking that down. What happened then? Because obviously we know what schools are like. We know that Dame D'Souza announced the end of August, right, we're going to have 100% attendance. We know that many parents have said that their children's anxiety is classed as non-authorized. How did you deal with it? And the other thing I wanted to just run past you as well was, you think it made a difference with you taking your daughter compared to your wife? So two things to think about there, because obviously a lot of mums drop their child off. But yeah, go for
Yeah,
it.
wow. Those are really good questions. So sorry, the first question is,
It's thinking about, what happened with the school once you said, right, we have to step in now and break it down. And I don't know which way around you want to kind of deal with it, because I suspect that that question is more meaty, whereas the one about, did you notice the difference between you and your wife in the way that staff worked with you? That's a much shorter answer, but take it as you choose.
okay, so in terms of what we did next, I might get these things in the wrong order, but I left work in late January. I immediately took on the role of trying to help my daughter in the morning, getting her to school. Um, Beginning of February, her attendance was by that point very sporadic. So there were days when we would set off but be unable to get any further, so we would come home. There were days when we just couldn't even get uniform on at home, and um, until that point, I mean, I guess in hindsight, what we could say is in the autumn term, when my daughter was in school, she was masking.
Yes.
So, although quite a few people at the front of house saw the distress in the morning, in a big secondary school, a lot of staff didn't see that.
Yeah.
So then, when she was in, if she was a little bit late or she might have been a bit tearful, but apart from that, she was masking. So she was in lessons. She wasn't misbehaving. She was just head down.
Yeah.
I mean, truly masking and not coping. But her end of term report for Christmas, it was like it was for another child, and we were because her attendance, although she'd missed some days, it didn't yet look terrible.
Yeah.
And attainment wise, all the comments were very positive. Everyone was very complimentary about her attitude and her work, and
Yeah.
but then fast forward sort of 6 weeks, suddenly her attendance figure is, a cause for concern. Um,
Less than 80% then.
yeah, and we I was seeing people every day at drop off, and of course, I wasn't in a rush to go anywhere. So
Yes.
what I wasn't going to be was palmed off, and also what I wasn't going to do was leave her in a dysregulated state
Yeah.
because I'd sussed by that point that that wasn't good for her.
Yeah.
So um, I was involved. I became, that dad probably at the front of school. But we requested a meeting with the school, I think in February, and our plan was we decided as parents we were going to request that our daughter was put on a reduced timetable.
Right.
We knew we'd already done the referral to Healthy Minds. We'd had an initial triage meeting. We were told we were on the waiting list, but we knew that that could be many months away. So
Yeah.
we also knew we had to do something to alleviate causes of stress and pressure and anxiety.
Yeah.
So we requested a meeting with the school, with the family liaison officer, and that happened quite quickly. And it was very supportive. It was agreed that we could go on a part-time timetable immediately, which we did, and it was much reduced. But to be honest, it was too late.
Yes.
So we were very proactive. We were doing everything we could as parents. And this is the bit I think sometimes people don't understand. They think you kind of let all this happen. So, maybe we missed some early signs, but we were quite quick to do a Healthy Minds referral. We were quite quick in the scheme of things to ask for a part-time timetable. But
Yeah.
in truth, it was too late because she simply couldn't cope. And what's important to note is at this stage, it it wasn't just school. So, and we've talked about this before, once the anxiety gets to a certain stage, it's not just one thing. At this moment in time, by February, we were barely leaving the house. Our daughter couldn't go in shops anymore, and she's always loved shopping. She,
Yeah.
we couldn't go to church. She didn't want visitors to come to our house. She stopped seeing her friends. She didn't even want to play with her sisters.
Yeah.
That's how small the world gets.
Yes.
And we always felt, and I think a lot of parents feel this, that the school thinks it's the school and it's only school attendance. And actually, although there might be a catalyst in the school and the school might be a significant part of the overall situation, anxiety is all consuming.
Yes.
And as it worsens, your world shrinks and it affects
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And we were at that point. And so we implemented a part-time timetable immediately. But the next week, it was even harder to get her to school any day.
Yeah.
And um, I guess fast forward a couple of extremely upsetting weeks, we we were pushing for the Healthy Minds referral, but we were just told you're in the system,
Yeah.
which is how it is. So we sought some private support, but even that was difficult because we live in a rural area. Another factor was we couldn't get the car to our daughter had become associated with anxiety because it was how
Yeah.
she used to get to school.
Yeah.
So any attempt to get in a car for any purpose was negative. So we couldn't easily find private support because it meant a drive somewhere. And at that point in time, we couldn't get in the car. So there was a bit of time where we tried to get our heads around that. We ultimately found private support and we started that very quickly. And our view, we reached a point as parents where we said, school at the moment, we need a fire break
Yeah.
because she can't recover because she's being put into the situation that's causing the issues.
Yeah.
So it was our view in February, after a few weeks of the part-time timetable, that we needed to do something differently.
Yeah.
So we actually requested from the school that we could take a break from her attending school while we sought treatment. And I believe that was pivotal in where we've now got to. And I think I've used this term before, and I don't say it lightly, but I think it was integral to saving her from
Yeah.
an alternative fate, because the natural thing to do is just to keep saying, keep coming to school, you're on a part-time timetable, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. But like any other illness, like a physical illness, if somebody's injured or ill, you have to take time to recover.
Yeah.
And that's what's often missing in this equation. There is no capacity or time to recover because schools are under pressure to get better attendance. So that pressure gets layered down, and then the parents put pressure on the child to be in school. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we think, oh, if we make a few tweaks, you'll be okay in school. But what we're
Yeah.
not doing is building in any time to recover.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, is absolutely crucial. Just like, and I've written about this quite a few times, if a sports person injures themselves in a serious way, let's say it's an athlete, a runner, we don't just say, I tell you what, just run half a marathon.
Yeah.
Don't run a full marathon. We know your leg's broken,
Yeah.
so just do a half marathon. And it's like saying, you've still got to keep running. Also, we're not going to give you any physio. We're not going to treat the break.
Yeah.
We're not going to do any. And if you just do this, then gradually you'll build up to doing
Yeah.
a marathon again, but with a broken leg. And
Yeah.
I know that's a bit of a crude analogy, but it's
It's
right
a very
because
good one. It's a very good
we,
one.
we're saying, okay, we recognize this, and this is causing you problems, but just do a bit less.
Yeah, yeah,
So our view was this needs to stop. We need to take stock. We need to pull her out of a situation that is causing her body and her mind to be in turmoil.
yeah.
And so we just stopped.
And did school agree with you or straight away, or did they try to negotiate with you?
To be fair, they were very good. Um, we had very candid conversations, and we provided a letter from the person who was supporting our daughter
Yeah,
explaining the situation, and they accepted that, and it was agreed. It wasn't indefinite, but there were no times. It was okay, you seek treatment. And our view was, we will be back.
yeah,
We're not, this isn't us. We don't want another school. Our daughter doesn't want another school. We don't need alternative provision. We need to get her better. When she's better, she'll be back.
yeah,
Like another illness. And I'm
yeah,
not, now that won't work for everybody. And it's not the case with everybody's anxiety because sometimes there's other things happening as well. But
yeah,
that was our view, and the school supported that. And so at the end of last February, she stopped going to school, and that was what we called a fire break.
yeah.
While we focused on a very intense sort of support package, I
Okay,
think
so,
I hope that does that answer your first part of that
yeah,
question.
no, that's great. So think about the second question then. Do you think things changed when you took over?
I do, and
And presumably
this
they
is a.
knew that you were a, you know, retired head teacher. So that surely had some weight behind it.
I think so, and it's a really interesting topic. This, I mean, I find it very curious. This whole world of having a child out of school or struggling mental health, being not fine in school, because most of what you read is from mothers and about mothers,
Yeah,
and it's been interesting, because I'm sort of a rarity in this sense that it's the dad taking the lead in the situation and doing the liaison, particularly with school. But I do feel that in our education system, there is an unconscious bias. And I think there is a tendency at times to patronize parents. But I think it happens more to women, if I'm honest, than to men. And I think sometimes school staff can think that, as I mentioned earlier, that maybe the mum is just a bit emotional, a bit
yeah.
sensitive, a bit over the top.
Bit too
Just need,
attached to their
yeah, a bit
child.
too much. You go on, they'll be fine.
Yeah,
And I don't think, in a general sense, people tend to treat dads in that same way.
yes.
Um, but also, as you say, my background is in education, and so the other difference is, well, there were two fundamental differences for us. My wife was trying to get all three girls to two different schools and to get to work, and so it was stressful. There
Yeah,
were times when my wife was upset and crying and just distraught because of what she was seeing. There were times when all four people in our car were distressed,
yeah,
and school staff saw that and they'll have formed their own conclusions about,
yeah.
maybe it's poor parenting, maybe it's,
Yeah, yeah,
hormones or anything. Of course, it was a different kettle of fish with me because I was just delivering one child, um, and I also am armed with inside out knowledge of the law around attendance, about
yeah.
guidance documents, about what's on offer locally, about the interventions and support services you can buy into. So what nobody could ever do to me was try and palm me off. And so this happens. Sometimes, I've
Yeah,
done it, and I hold my hands up. Sometimes you try and you want to hurry the parents away, or you try and palm people off. But my situation was such that it was no good if somebody tried to tell me, "Oh, you can we'll do a part-time timetable, but we can only do 4 weeks. Or if it doesn't work, this is going to happen. Because, I knew my stuff, and it meant that I was in a very good position to objectively support my daughter and advocate for her
Yeah.
and champion for her. I'm also, and this, you know, this shouldn't be a factor, but it is. I'm also very good at staying composed in difficult situations because you have to be as a head.
Yeah.
And so even if you're furious or upset or confused, you put on your head teacher face and so even that I was really deeply upset some days when we got my daughter to school. And it was heartbreaking to see. But I was able to, because I wasn't rushing off to something else, I didn't have other commitments, and um, I would be able to kind of get into this zone.
Yeah.
And again, it helped because, if you're just composed, people can't say, "Oh, well, you're just emotional," or
Yeah.
you're over the top, you're a wreck yourself, or you need mental health support yourself. It was kind of, and I think those things sometimes do happen to
Yes.
parents.
Yeah.
You on the walk home, you're left thinking, is it me? Am I a bad parent? Am I going mad?
Yeah.
Am I over the top? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, beautiful, beautiful. So, how long did your daughter have as a break then, a complete fire break? How long did she have?
So the complete break was approximately 2 months. It was late February. I think we did a week after February half term, maybe two. And then she was complete. So she didn't set foot in school between then and the end of April.
Yeah,
Within that time, there was the Easter holiday, but almost a full half term, the 2 week Easter holiday. And within that time, we kept in touch with school. We weren't hiding. It was we touched base. All that we had, um, the commitment was there was an A4 worksheet. You'll know the sort of thing, and it had kind of little emoticons. So each day we would put the date on it, how she felt in the morning and an afternoon, things we'd done that day, things we'd enjoyed doing. So it wasn't school related. It was, maybe been a bit of gardening,
yeah,
done some painting. And we would just keep up. So we had a 1 page overview of our week and we would submit that to the school.
yeah,
And so we were keeping in touch,
yeah.
but it was low level. There was no academic expectation. Um, and the way back to school was after Easter, at the very end of April. We went back to what was pitched as gardening club.
Right.
It was a gardening club. It was a lunchtime event. It was open to anyone, but actually, and helpfully for us, nobody else attended. So it turned out being one-to-one with the school groundskeeper,
Nice.
and it was the absolute perfect thing that was needed
Yeah,
because what it meant was on an agreed day, I think it was Tuesday lunchtime, I took my daughter to school, and it's like kind of stripped back, unplugged, school unplugged. And so I was with her. It was late April. The weather was getting a bit better, but
yes,
she didn't need her uniform on, so there was none of that association. She didn't need her bags or her books. And simply we met the groundskeeper. The groundskeeper didn't know any of the history. She'd probably seen her upset a few times, but she didn't. She's not a teacher. And we met the groundskeeper, went through to the school allotment area,
yeah,
and I was with her. So there were the three of us, and the groundskeeper just kind of took her under a wing and started saying, "Oh, well, we're going to plant these today, or we're going to. Do you know what these are?" No talk about her health, her worries, school
nice,
expectations. Very
nice.
nurturing, you know, and that's how it started.
Yeah,
And from that, between the end of April and the end of the summer term. So really, the full summer term, most of the summer term was spent growing that.
Yeah.
It was from that seed from
That's a good
from
pun.
sorry, yeah, from a bit of planting to growing that. So originally I was there, and then we would. So I think the first time the plan was that we would go for 20 minutes and meet the groundskeeper, but we ended up staying half an hour. And
Yeah.
then the next time we increased the time and we increased the frequency. So it went from being one lunchtime a week to two lunchtimes a week. And then gradually I kind of stepped back. So I
Yeah.
was still there. And then eventually I was in the car on the grounds, out of sight, but still there. And gradually, sort of the pastoral team would come and visit her while she was there, just come and say hello, what are you doing? And everything like just built a bit like graded exposure, but sort of quite organic. And
Yeah.
it was arranged that a friend would come and meet her at gardening club, and then a few friends, and then one day, just kind of spontaneously, she went off with them after gardening club and went to the school canteen and got something from a vending machine.
Nice.
And it all kind of just evolved in this child-led, low-pressured way. And the with in addition to that, it meant that by the summer she'd she'd hit a few huge milestones. She went for half a day of the school trip for her year group,
Right.
which was in Lincoln, which is an hour away from where we live.
Yeah.
It was all carefully planned, so she didn't go on the coach because at that stage traveling was still very difficult.
Yes.
So my wife and I took her in the car. We, almost followed the coach, met up with school, handed her over. She had half a day of a school trip, and she, more importantly than just going, she enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And um, and then she also went to some of the school sports day at the end in the summer term, and they were all steps along the way. But from, starting in the September to, new school not going well, to February falling out of school, April, this very, very measured, slow return. And that lasted through the summer term.
Yeah.
And of course, not everybody's school would agree to that. Not everybody would have the luxury of being able to do that because they might probably be at work or have other commitments.
Yes.
Because we had this capacity, that's what we did. And it was then an art lesson in September, which was the first kind of formal lesson back,
Right.
almost what 6 or 7 months after she'd stopped going altogether.
Yes. And when she went back in the September to do the art, was she continuing with the 1 to 2 lunchtimes with gardening?
Yeah, so gardening ran for the beginning of September,
Right.
and again it was quite organic. The actual plan was, and by this time we had an EBSA worker involved, we had a
Right.
mental health practitioner through Healthy Minds, we had a
Yes.
graded exposure plan, but we modified that. And the actual plan for the day she went into an art lesson was she was going to meet the art teacher
Right.
and she was going to visit the classroom.
Right.
And and actually, she went in and met them and visited and stayed.
Nice.
And that was the beginning of a plan, which we're still on, a bespoke plan all
Yeah.
these months later. And a year ago she was out of school, and we didn't know what the future held.
Yeah.
This week, it's the last week of term here. Last week, she attends 4 days a week now. And
Right.
last week she attended 3 or 4 out of 5 lessons every day of those 4 days, which is
Amazing.
the most since October 2022.
Yes.
But more importantly than the numbers, because I don't want to fall into that trap, it's the fact that she's there, and she's not just there and coping. She's beginning to shine and thrive, and she's healthier.
Yes.
And those things are, that's what you want as a parent, isn't it?
Yes. And I'm really grateful to you for all your time that you've given us in doing this. It's been so lovely having you. Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I mean, you know, it's a whole world, and if it helps one person, then that's time very well spent, in my view. So yeah, I hope it's been of use.
That's really good. Thank you so much.